Is the idea that the Celts fought with no formations at all as individuals overstated or the truth? Whenever I come across the Celts fighting Rome, the Celts are always described as being a bunch of half-naked guys in blue paint seeking out individual combat, which was fine when they surprised and Zerg rushed the Romans, but not if the Romans were properly ready in formation. It might be nice to hear an expert view on this.
Now again, very interesting question. That was the question I'm most looking forward to. Hallstatt, again, we have to differentiate between Hallstatt culture and Latin culture. For the Hallstatt culture, again, we don't have any written sources, we just have depictions to interpret, and we have the finds. That's a hard basis to identify what's the tactic used. Now, for example, some people say, okay, they might perhaps have some kind of hoplite-like war style. I'm a little bit skeptic of it because the shields weren't really suited for it. Especially the oval ones just aren't really suited for it. Some depictions show aspis like shields like the Greeks used, but these depictions often have an italic origin. So Etruscans, Veneti, Este culture. So perhaps they're showing their warriors. Because we know for the Etruscans for sure that they had this kind of warfare like the Greeks, this phalanx warfare. For the Latin period, these Roman descriptions, they're quite contradictious. They contradict each other. Now this what we have always in mind when we think of Celtic warfare. Yeah, there's a bunch of people who scream and half naked and then attack the enemy and then let's hope for the best. This is this is mostly from Caesar, who says, yeah, well, it's not so difficult to fight with them because you just need to provoke them and that they will YOLO into you. But there is a little bit more. Now, Livy describes for the Battle of Sentinum in 295 BC that they even interlocked their shields. And that they were really hard to penetrate with the javelins of their own. Then other guys, Polybi describes in the for the Battle of Telamon that the shields were too small to interlock. By the way, that's one of the main points where this myth comes from. This myth, it's not that far away, this perhaps a topos, that they were naked in combat. Because now what they did was, the first line was the so-called Gesati. This was a tribe, Celtic tribe from perhaps today Helvetia, so Switzerland. And they stripped naked, but why? Not because, of course, Polybi describes a lot of foolhardiness and so, but it's more likely that this was the other reason, the main reason which Polybi described. There were bushes, and they were in the opinion, okay, when they are dressed, they will get hanging in the bushes, it will have their movement will be restricted. And so it's better to fight naked. By the way, not painted. That's not written there.
Okay.
And now what happened then? He describes, okay, they're throwing the Romans through their pila. Some are hit, and because the shields, he accords that, according to Polybi, were too small. They were hit, and then they made two different directions. One part ran to the second line, and one just ran straight forward towards the Romans. Again, not just YOLOing, but they did it because they wanted to close the distance. And on the other, for example, is when Livy describes the Galatian wars. And there was one battle where the Galatians, again he describes them as naked, interestingly. Now again, with a pinch of salt, was it really
naked
or without armor? It's more likely without armor, although sometimes he describes them as just with trousers and
naked is a very relative term.
Half naked, basically. And they even made a little fortification to hold that line, but weren't successful with it. Now, what's now the suggestion? We have to say, perhaps they were for sure able to hold a formation. I mean, just think of that. Why would you, a bunch of absolutely undisciplined guys, when you're Hannibal at the Battle of Cannae, put the Celts and the Celt Iberians in the center when they're just a bunch of undisciplined guys? Yeah. Of course, he wanted just to bait the Romans to come in to smash through the center, but the center actually, basically, of course, they moved back, but they never ran away. And they didn't charge forward, but they just did that thing.
Yeah, they had to fight the delaying action, which
there was a delaying
pretty
action.
Hard thing to do even nowadays. Yeah.
Yeah, even nowadays it's really hard. So this wasn't that really of an undisciplined bunch. That's a little bit now what we have. Were they in the charge? The same. It's a difficult story. Perhaps they were in the charge quite undisciplined. They just ran on forward, and now it looks like YOLOing, but it's not YOLOing. It's more they just try to smash through the first lines and to burst the enemy formation. That's basically the idea. Of course, that doesn't really work, for example, with the Romans. By the way, why you have to always read with a pinch of salt these Roman records is, for example, they write, yeah, well, the Celtic swords weren't able to thrust. They were just slashing weapons, which just isn't true. We have archaeological finds of such swords, and they were quite good at thrusting, but they were quite long.
So they were not suited for thrusting in a
it was perhaps
the Romans fought.
Basically now, okay, please take this a little bit with also with a pinch of salt. I just tried to make an analog look at, for example, the videos of another YouTube, Demicator 2. He shows Viking Age combat, and that's more likely that this was more that kind of fighting. So with thrusts, with cuts, with slashes, but not now this just slashing like we do imagine in some other form.
So basically, to sum this up, hopefully I get it right, it seems that there are definitely indicators that there was some kind of organization and formation in a certain degree.
Quite sure.
And then the other thing is, of course, we need to see it in relative form. So the Romans were very organized, they had very strict formations. And it's like, for me, like I lately described, for instance, for an engineer, sometimes other disciplines are a bunch of hippies because they are not so strict. So it's always seen in the relatively the same thing with naked. For some people, you are naked if they can see your knee.
Yeah.
And for some people, naked starts if you're really butt naked and you see everything. So everything, and this happened, well, a few hundred years between different language. The language changed. I mean, we have new words now, and which we had 10 years ago.
Exactly, that's one thing. And you have now to imagine too, now we have that, especially now for the culture speaking, we have a differentiation in warfare. We have cavalry, we have men with axes and spears, we have men with just spears and just axes. So of course, all with a different tactical usefulness. You can use them. Now the ones with the spears will throw their spear and one have to fight with it. The others with spears and axes will throw their spears and have one for the close combat and then use the axe. Cavalry, quite difficult. Perhaps they would use it as a close combat weapon. More surely they would throw it as a javelin. But again, that's a little bit of speculation. But it shows something. It gives a clue. Well, there might have been some kind of organization structure.
Big thank you to Stefan and the staff at the Keltenberg Fröck here. And be aware they have a few upcoming events in 2018. For the 14th and 15th of July, there's a Keltentreffen and reenactment, so you can watch people reenact like Celts, Hallstatt period and Latin period. Then for the 16th to 22nd of July, there's the Week of Archaeology. Now they have a special program for this time, for instance, events for kids, but also tours of the museum during the night, and there's a forest area included with some parts of the museum where you can see old burial mounds, and we walked through it during the day, and I'm pretty sure it's pretty awesome during the night. There are other specials as well. Be sure to check out the homepage on this. And on the 21st and 22nd of July, there's another meeting of reenactors. So be sure to check it out. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye. Yeah, I think we covered everything.
I think too, yeah.
So a big thank you here to Stefan at the
problem.
museum. And also a big thank you to our Patreons for helping me fund the equipment and the fuel and everything else. So thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye.
Till next time.